Welcome to East Flicks, where we bring you deep dives into the world of cinema. Today, we're exploring the film The Foreigner, which premiered on October 13, 2017, in the United States. Whether you're a dedicated fan or just curious about what makes this movie stand out, you're in the right place. If you enjoy in-depth discussions about movies, consider subscribing so you never miss a new breakdown. Now, let's get into the heart of this film and uncover what makes it a must-watch. Overview of the film. The Foreigner is a gripping action thriller directed by Marc Campbell, known for his work on Casino Royale and The Mask of Zorro. This film is adapted from Stephen Leather's 1992 novel The Chinaman, which blends a personal revenge story with complex political drama. The movie features Jackie Chan in a dramatic role that's far from the usual action-packed martial arts spectacle he's known for. The plot centers around a father, Kwon Nak-min Chan, who seeks vengeance for his daughter's murder at the hands of a terrorist group. Alongside him is Pierce Brosnan as Liam Hennessy, a former IRA member turned politician who becomes entangled in the mystery of the bombing and the violent pursuit that follows. Key facts. * release date. October 13, 2017, U.S. * director Marc Campbell. * based on The Chinaman by Stephen Leather. * starring Jackie Chan as Kwon Nak-min, Pierce Brosnan as Liam Hennessy, Orla Brady as Mary Hennessy. * genre, action, thriller. * box office. The Foreigner grossed $34.4 million in the United States and Canada and a total of $145.4 million worldwide, against a production budget of $35 million. * filming locations. The movie was filmed in various locations including London and Ireland, with notable scenes shot around Lambeth Bridge and Regent High School in Camden. * music. The score was composed by Cliff Martinez, adding an atmospheric touch to the suspenseful narrative. The Foreigner is a 2017 action thriller film directed by Marc Campbell, with a screenplay by David Marconi, based on Stephen Leather's 1992 novel The Chinaman, a British-Chinese-American co-production. The film stars Jackie Chan, Pierce Brosnan, Michael McElhatton, Lu Tao, Charlie Murphy, Orla Brady, and Katie Leung. The story follows a London-based Chinese Hmong restaurateur and former soldier who embarks on a quest for vengeance after his daughter is killed in a terrorist attack. The film premiered in China on September 30, 2017, distributed by Wuzhou Film Distribution. It was later released in the United States on October 13, 2017, by STX Entertainment, and in the United Kingdom on December 15, 2017, via Netflix. The Foreigner received generally favorable reviews, with critics praising its action sequences, musical score, and the nuanced, against-type performances by Chan and Brosnan, though its plot was criticized as formulaic. The film grossed $145 million globally and became one of the top 10 most-watched Netflix original films in the UK in 2018. Nak-min Kwon, a widower and Vietnam War veteran, runs a Chinese restaurant in London. His life is shattered when his only daughter, Fan, is killed in a terrorist bombing in Knightsbridge. An IRA splinter group calling itself the Authentic IRA claims responsibility. Desperate for justice, Kwon repeatedly visits Scotland Yard for information, but is dismissed by Commander Bromley, who warns him not to interfere. Determined, Kwon travels to Belfast to confront Liam Hennessy, the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland and a former provisional IRA leader turned political advisor. Leaving the restaurant to his friend Lam, Kwon demands the names of the bombers. Hennessy denies involvement, prompting Kwon to escalate his efforts by planting a homemade bomb in Hennessy's office and a fake explosive on his car as warnings. Hennessy, alarmed by Kwon's persistence, orders his henchman Jim Cavanaugh to locate and neutralize him, while also organizing searches of IRA weapons caches for missing explosives. However, Kwon fends off Hennessy's men and continues his campaign, photographing Hennessy with his mistress, Maggie Dunn, and later attacking Hennessy's farmhouse with more explosives. Despite being injured in a confrontation with Cavanaugh, Kwon escapes into the wilderness, setting traps and evading capture. Hennessy then brings in his nephew Sean Morrison, a former Royal Irish Regiment soldier, to track Kwon. Meanwhile, tensions rise as a double-decker bus is bombed without the usual code word warning, deepening distrust between Hennessy and Bromley. Hennessy learns that his wife, Mary, inadvertently leaked sensitive information through an affair with Sean. When Bromley identifies one of the bombers, he pressures Hennessy to extract more details from his former IRA commander, Hugh McGrath. Hennessy tortures McGrath, discovering that Maggie, whose real name is Sarah McKay, is part of the terrorist cell. He also learns that Mary orchestrated the attacks out of hatred for both the British and Hennessy, motivated by her brother's murder by a UVF death squad. Hennessy kills McGrath and uses the information to assist Morrison in tracking down Quan. Quan, however, manages to overpower Morrison and forces him to reveal the bombers' identities and location. Disguised as a gas man, Quan infiltrates the bombers' London hideout, killing most of them except for Sarah, whom he wounds. He escapes just before counterterrorism forces storm the flat. Under interrogation, Sarah discloses the location of the final bomb, hidden in a reporter's laptop and intended to explode on a plane carrying British dignitaries. Authorities intercept the reporter at the airport, disposing of the laptop just in time to prevent casualties. Sarah is later executed to cover up loose ends. In the aftermath, British Cabinet Minister Catherine Davies, who was targeted in the failed attack, informs Hennessy she knows of his complicity but allows him to retain his political position under her control. Meanwhile, Morrison kills Mary, effectively dismantling the terrorist cell. Quan confronts Hennessy with incriminating photos of him and Maggie, forcing Hennessy to post them online, exposing his ties to the bombers. With his mission complete, Quan returns to his restaurant and reunites with Lamb. Bromley, recognizing Quan's role in stopping the bombers, decides not to pursue him but places him under surveillance for the future. Cast: Jackie Chan as Quan Nak Min, Pierce Brosnan as Liam Hennessy, Orla Brady as Mary Hennessy, Dermot Crowley as Hugh McGrath, Ray Farron as Commander Richard Bromley, Rory Fleckburn as Sean Morrison, Michael McIlhatton as Jim Kavanagh, Charlie Murphy as Maggie Dunn/Sarah McKay, Lu Tao as Lamb, Leah Williams as Catherine Davies, Saulen Byrne as McCormick, John Cronin as Dennis Fisher, Stephen Hogan as Christy Murphy, Rufus Jones as Ian Wood, Katie Leung as Fan, Neil McNamee as Patrick O'Reilly, Aaron Monahan as Pat Nugent, David Pierce as Billy McMahon. Production. On June 5, 2015, it was announced that Jackie Chan would star in The Foreigner, an action thriller for STX Entertainment, based on Stephen Leather's novel The Chinaman. Nick Cassavetes was initially set to direct the film, with the screenplay adapted by David Marconi, and Marc Godfrey serving as one of the producers. The story is partially set in Walworth, London. By July 15, 2015, Martin Campbell was in talks to replace Cassavetes as director, with Relativity Media financing the project. Campbell ultimately directed the film, reportedly earning $2 million for his work. Pierce Brosnan joined the cast in November, reuniting with Campbell, who had previously directed him in the 1995 James Bond film GoldenEye. Co-stars Jackie Chan and Lu Tao promoted the film at the Shanghai Film Festival on June 11, 2016. Filming. Principal photography began in January 2016. A notable scene involving a bus explosion on Lambeth Bridge in London caused public alarm, as some were unaware it was a planned stunt. Additional scenes were filmed at the Walters and Cohen-designed Regent High School in Camden and on Churton Street in Pimlico on February 18, 2016. Music. Cliff Martinez composed the film score, adding a distinctive atmosphere to the intense action and dramatic moments. Release. The Foreigner premiered theatrically in China on September 30, 2017, distributed by Wuzhou Film Distribution. It was released in the United States on October 13, 2017, by STX Entertainment. In the Philippines, the film debuted on October 18, 2017, through Viva International Pictures. Box office. The film grossed $34.4 million in the United States and Canada and $111 million internationally, resulting in a worldwide total of $145.4 million against a production budget of $35 million. In its opening weekend in the US and Canada, The Foreigner competed with Happy Death Day, Marshall, and Professor Marston and the Wonder Women. It was projected to earn $10 to $15 million from 2,555 theaters. The film took in $4.8 million on its opening day, including $855,000 from Thursday night previews, and ultimately debuted to $15.5 million, ranking third at the box office behind Happy Death Day and Blade Runner 2049. Home media. In the United Kingdom, The Foreigner was released on Netflix on December 15, 2017. It became one of the UK's top 10 most-watched Netflix original films of 2018, garnering a 0.37% share of the total Netflix content consumed in the UK that year. In the United States, the film was made available on DVD and Blu-ray on January 9, 2018, while Canada and other international markets received the home release on January 23, 2018. Critical response. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 66%, based on 127 reviews, with an average rating of 6 out of 10. The critics' consensus reads, The Foreigner adheres strictly to action thriller formula, but benefits from committed and out-of-character performances from its talented veteran stars. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 55 out of 100, based on 23 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audience reception was more favorable, with CinemaScore polling an average grade of A- on an A+ to F scale, and Post-Track reporting that 78% of viewers gave it a positive score. Critics generally praised the film for its performances, especially Jackie Chan's against-type portrayal. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone awarded the film 3 out of 4 stars, lauding Chan's dramatic turn. It's the most dramatic role Chan has ever tackled, and he plays it with coiled intensity and raw emotional power. Similarly, Clarence Sui of The Hollywood Reporter commended Chan's performance, writing, It's good to see Chan swapping his happy-go-lucky persona for 2 hours for some gravitas as a tragic rogue with a marked past. John Barra of Screen Daily highlighted the film's action sequences, Cliff Martinez's musical score, and Martin Campbell's direction, stating, Campbell's unfussy style works well with Chan's choreography. The star's willingness to look at his 63 years makes the falls look like they hurt and creates a sense of jeopardy when Quan finds himself outnumbered. Barra further praised the film for its nuanced take on terrorism, noting it never commits the cinematic sin of suggesting that terrorism is a threat that can be readily dispatched with a few one-liners. Ignatiy Vishnevetsky of the AV Club called the film a good, lean cut of meat. In other words, a typical Martin Campbell movie, expeditious and cold-blooded in its crosscut, cloak-and-dagger plotting and violence. The Chicago Reader applauded both Chan and Brosnan's performances, describing The Foreigner as a twisty, bracing political thriller, giving Chan room to display his dramatic ability. The Times of India gave a positive review as well, praising Campbell's direction and the film's suspenseful tone, stating it keeps viewers engrossed. However, some critics were less impressed. Peter DeBruge of Variety found the film to be an above-average but largely by-the-numbers action movie, noting that while Chan holds his own, the movie pits him against generic thugs and shadowy political forces. Glenn Kenny of the New York Times expressed disappointment in Chan's reduced action sequences, saying he doesn't deliver the action pizzazz here that he used to. Kenny also criticized the plot as convoluted and the depiction of the IRA as antagonists as outdated in light of modern political events. ChatGPT. Potential sequel. In January 2016, The New Yorker reported an intriguing discussion between Jackie Chan and then STX chairman Adam Fogelson regarding a possible sequel to The Foreigner. Chan revealed that a female character originally written to die in the script was kept alive with the intention of exploring her story in a follow-up film. Chan suggested a plot where the IRA goes after her, and that's the story. Fogelson expanded on the broader industry shift toward franchise building, stating a few years ago, thinking about the sequel that way would be characterized as a lazy, greedy bastardization of the creative process. If you said that now, you'd be telling the entire world that they're wrong. He described sequels as having evolved into a necessary part of modern storytelling, akin to serialized television, which allows for narratives to develop across multiple resolutions. This approach, Fogelson argued, aligns with audience expectations and supports a more predictable business model. You can aspire to create 6 two-hour movies that develop your concept across multiple resolutions, he explained, emphasizing that such planning not only makes films easier to market but also lays the foundation for sustained profitability. He concluded that approximately half the projects greenlit by studios now have built-in sequelable potential. While no sequel to The Foreigner has been officially announced, these comments underscore the industry's inclination toward franchising successful films, leaving the door open for the continuation of Kwan Nok Min's story. The turgid revenge thriller, The Foreigner, is an all-around lousy movie. For starters, Jackie Chan, an action star who is struggling to find age-appropriate roles in his 60s, is barely in The Foreigner, an adaptation of Stephen Leather's source novel. This is especially disappointing since Chan's Sparkle Roll Media production company is prominently foreground in the film's opening credits, and he's featured prominently in the film's marketing. Then again, maybe Chan's absence is for the best given how unconvincing his performance is as grieving 61-year-old ex-military man Kwan. Kwan is defined by his age, and his monomaniacal need to get eye for an eye justice since his daughter was blown up in a bank explosion by an organization calling themselves the Authentic IRA. So Chan is heavily made up with exaggerated crow's feet, gigundu, raccoon-like bags around his eyes, and party giant quality gray streaks in his hair. He also wears a mile-long face, and isn't as energetic or graceful as he has been in superior recent films like Chinese Zodiac or Railroad Tigers. Chan also tends to vanish for long stretches at a time while a bunch of British and Irish diplomats, policemen, and terrorists talk, debrief, and generally drown viewers in a convoluted story of political intrigue. Imagine all the worst parts of a Robert Ludlum novel: overlong expository dialogue, monotonous and all too brief action scenes, and a hero who can never be found when you need him, and replace Jason Bourne with Jackie Chan playing an unflattering Charles Bronson-type character, and you have The Foreigner. Much of The Foreigner revolves around the back-channel dealings of Irish diplomat Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, a former IRA member who is now hell-bent on protecting his decades-long legacy of diplomacy with the British. So he does what any Bourne-style politico does. He gathers a bunch of guys in a boardroom, and he yells at them about how he wants to know who the authentic IRA is, names, dates, camera footage, etc. Turn over every stone, shake every tree, climb every mountain. He wants those guys yesterday. Hennessy, an anti-hero defined by Brosnan's atrocious Irish accent and a forehead peppered with liver spots that seem to proliferate with every extreme close-up, spends a lot of time on the phone and drinking scotch. He also does what every other Bourne-style government wonk does: repeatedly curse out his men about how they're always a few steps behind the authentic IRA, and Kwan, the latter of whom has declared a personal war on Hennessy since the Irishman has previously worked with the IRA. We pause to reflect on the anti-Irish/British politics of The Foreigner. Why, exactly, do we need a movie that condemns the Irish for having a violent past, despite recent peaceful collaboration with the Brits? Why Irish terrorism, of all things, in a year where institutionalized misogyny and white nationalism have become unavoidable topics? Chan has, in the past, spoken out against anti-Chinese government protesters. So it's not too much of a leap in logic to imagine that his reactionary real-life politics might lead him to disdain terrorists who become politicians. Still, this is the problem he feels should be exploited for an action film? Sure, everybody from a disenfranchised Thor to a newly revived Paul Kersey wants revenge this year. But picking on the Irish is like diagnosing a gunshot victim's cankle as their most pressing concern. Of course, there's a twist that you can see coming during the first few minutes. And there's a lot of monotonous, uninspired John Rambo/Bronson in the Mechanic-style booby traps and makeshift bomb shenanigans that ultimately lead to the most unintentionally funny scene of post-explosion firefighting you're likely to see this year. These guys are so bad at putting out fires that one guy repeatedly aims his hose at a fireless roof. And there's a lot of exhausting and exhaustive backstory, none of which plays to Chan's talents as a performer or director Martin Campbell's strengths as an action filmmaker. Campbell is best known as the helmer of the franchise-reviving James Bond films, Casino Royale and GoldenEye. But he was probably hired to direct The Foreigner because of his knack for cheesy revenge dramas, particularly the surprisingly okay 2010 Edge of Darkness remake. Sadly, none of that earlier film's knack for preposterous, testosterone-driven violence is here in The Foreigner, possibly because Edge of Darkness screenwriter and meathead cinema poet laureate William Monahan didn't adapt The Foreigner too. As a result, watching The Foreigner is a thoroughly dispiriting experience. You wait for characters to take a break from gabbing about Hennessy's connections with everyone from old IRA members to newer IRA members. But when Chan finally does swing into action, it's in scenes that overemphasize his character's age and lack of coordination. Chan as Quan falls over himself far too much. He clearly has some moves, but his character is supposed to be old and slow. So Chan must get pummeled twice for every blow he lands. Sadly, the blows that Chan does dish out are graceless and mechanical. The choreography of these scenes is intentionally ragged, even if Campbell films them well enough. Chan may still be figuring out what he can and can't do in his old age. But Drek, like The Foreigner, should be swiftly crossed off his bucket list and never revisited. Yukov The Foreigner revolves around the back-channel dealings of Irish diplomat Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, a former IRA member who is now hell-bent on protecting his decades-long legacy of diplomacy with the British. So he does what any Bourne-style politico does. He gathers a bunch of guys in a boardroom, and he yells at them about how he wants to know who the authentic IRA is, names, dates, camera footage, etc. Turn over every stone, shake every tree, climb every mountain. He wants those guys yesterday. Hennessy, an antihero defined by Brosnan's atrocious Irish accent and a forehead peppered with liver spots that seem to proliferate with every extreme close-up, spends a lot of time on the phone and drinking scotch. He also does what every other Bourne-style government wonk does. Repeatedly curse out his men about how they're always a few steps behind the authentic IRA, and Quan, the latter of whom has declared a personal war on Hennessy since the Irishman has previously worked with the IRA. We pause to reflect on the anti-Irish/British politics of The Foreigner. Why, exactly, do we need a movie that condemns the Irish for having a violent past, despite recent peaceful collaboration with the Brits? Why Irish terrorism, of all things, in a year where institutionalized misogyny and white nationalism have become unavoidable topics? Chan has, in the past, spoken out against anti-Chinese government protesters. So it's not too much of a leap in logic to imagine that his reactionary real-life politics might lead him to disdain terrorists who become politicians. Still, this is the problem he feels should be exploited for an action film? Sure, everybody from a disenfranchised Thor to a newly revived Paul Kersey wants revenge this year. But picking on the Irish is like diagnosing a gunshot victim's cankle as their most pressing concern. Of course, there's a twist that you can see coming during the first few minutes. And there's a lot of monotonous, uninspired John Rambo/Bronson in the mechanic-style booby traps and makeshift bomb shenanigans that ultimately lead to the most unintentionally funny scene of post-explosion fire fighting you're likely to see this year. These guys are so bad at putting out fires that one guy repeatedly aims his hose at a fireless roof. And there's a lot of exhausting and exhaustive backstory, none of which plays to Chan's talents as a performer or director Martin Campbell's strengths as an action filmmaker. Campbell is best known as the helmer of the franchise-reviving James Bond films, Casino Royale and GoldenEye, but he was probably hired to direct The Foreigner because of his knack for cheesy revenge dramas, particularly the surprisingly okay 2010 Edge of Darkness remake. Sadly, none of that earlier film's knack for preposterous, testosterone-driven violence is here in The Foreigner, possibly because Edge of Darkness screenwriter and meathead cinema poet laureate William Monahan didn't adapt The Foreigner too. As a result, watching The Foreigner is a thoroughly dispiriting experience. You wait for characters to take a break from gabbing about Hennessy's connections with everyone from old IRA members to newer IRA members. But when Chan finally does swing into action, it's in scenes that overemphasize his character's age and lack of coordination. Chan as Quan falls over himself far too much. He clearly has some moves, but his character is supposed to be old and slow. So Chan must get pummeled twice for every blow he lands. Sadly, the blows that Chan does dish out are graceless and mechanical. The choreography of these scenes is intentionally ragged, even if Campbell films them well enough. Chan may still be figuring out what he can and can't do in his old age. But Drek, like The Foreigner, should be swiftly crossed off his bucket list and never revisited. I went into The Foreigner expecting it to be a painfully bad Jackie Chan's Taken. Instead, it's quite good. The perfect action thriller that you'd stumble across on TNT on a rainy Saturday afternoon while flipping channels and find yourself sucked into it for the next 2 hours. I mean, TNT does no drama. The setup is simple. An IRA bomb blows up in London and kills 12 people, one of whom is the teenage daughter of Jackie Chan's character Quan. Normally, this is the point in the review where I would snark about not bothering to look up the character's name because Jackie Chan, for all his joyous personality and impossible physicality, only ever plays one character. All variations on Jackie Chan. Much like Statham always stars as Statham, Jackie Chan is always Jackie Chan. Not so here. Chan drops some acting on the screen. Quan is quiet and gentle. His few words of dialogue before the tragedy, pure dad humor. And afterwards, he brings a devastated gravitas to every scene, not playing for a moment into some Liam Neeson growling revenge fantasy. He is Jackie Chan, of course, and brings the martial arts to bear, but he conveys every action with a heavy world weariness. He speaks softly. He asks the same questions over and over with a dull monotony born of seeing horror over and over again. There's no melodrama to it, no action movie grittiness. And while he has a very specific set of skills, it's not a character of taglines and dramatic entries. Just the sad exhaustion of a man who has lost everything going through the only motions he knows. The acting is fantastic all around. When Pierce Brosnan showed up in the first few minutes when I still assumed I was in for a lousy rip-off of Taken, I thought to myself, why in the world is Brosnan in this? It became clear pretty quickly. Because he read the goddamn script. Brosnan gets to play the weaselly backstabbing nominal head of the IRA, Liam Hennessy. The Jerry Adams sort who has as much blood on his hands as the worst of them but parlayed that into a seat playing both sides at the table in peacetime. He's conniving, weak, and duplicitous without ever becoming a cartoon. But while the movie is centered on Quan in its narrative, its world isn't centered on him, doesn't revolve around him. This is a taut thriller, and aren't all good thrillers taut? Economies are robust, cultures are vibrant, and thrillers are taut. In 2 hours of runtime, this movie packs in a host of characters. The black chief of security running the investigation, the female MP running the political side of things, a half-dozen distinct IRA bosses and soldiers, the reporter working the story, the bombing team themselves, Hennessy's wife, Hennessy's mistress, Hennessy's former Special Forces nephew. This film should feel bloated and rushed, and instead it feels perfect and populated. Every one of those characters fully realized with a few brushstrokes so that they feel in moments like real living and breathing people who are serving as protagonists in their own stories rather than plot points in another's. There are schemes within schemes, in a tale so messy it feels exactly like the real world, with no neat answers and no clean resolutions. It also never makes the mistake of cartoonish escalation. It's a story that feels very grounded in the real world, where 12 dead in a bombing is nationally mobilizing, where another bombing threatens to drag down decades of peace. This isn't a world that goes the action movie route of CGI demolitions of entire city blocks. It knows how to make the story matter more by keeping it tight and focused. The Foreigner feels like a throwback to the sort of thrillers we got in the 70s and 80s. It feels like early Clancy or Ludlum or maybe Le Carre put up on the screen. And that makes sense, it's based on a 1992 novel called The Chinaman by Stephen Leather. I'd love to hear the story of how the hell this becomes a decent film in 2017. I remember reading a few Stephen Leather novels 20 years back. They're not good, as I recall. Second-tier dark and gritty Ludlum rip-offs for the most part. And I see on Wikipedia he's written dozens of novels since then. So why? Why does a random novel from a quarter-century ago by this guy get optioned for a movie, and then somehow end up being a decent movie to top it all? Jackie Chan has broken a lot of bones over the years, his own, and those of his unfortunate on-screen rivals. But for the life of me, I can't remember ever seeing Chan cry. But cry he does in The Foreigner, an old-fashioned one-man vendetta thriller very much in the vein of its director Martin Campbell's gnarly 1985 miniseries, Edge of Darkness, in which the opening stretch allows the action comedy stunt master a chance to flex an entirely different muscle, his tear ducts. Chan plays Quan Nok Min, an immigrant restaurant owner who demands justice after his daughter is killed in an IRA-linked terrorist attack. Yes, you read that right. The villains in this UK-set action movie are Northern Irish radicals who call themselves the New IRA, which is just one of the curiosities you get when taking a pulpy 1992 suspense novel published 5 years before the IRA ceasefire and attempting to set it a quarter-century later. That book would be Stephen Leather's The Chinaman, whose name has wisely been changed, although not that wisely, because who really wants to see a movie generically called The Foreigner? And while the title, time, and a few small details may have been altered or updated, the result is nothing if not dated, even if its premise clearly echoes the edginess of living in Europe today. For starters, practically everyone in The Foreigner still refers to Chan's character as the Chinaman, which is the kind of description that one associates more with episodes of Deadwood than modern-day Belfast or London. The epithet is by no means equivalent to the more specific labels of Frenchman or Englishman, in that it has traditionally been used as a blanket term for Asians of all nationalities. But, and this is a key distinction, the movie is keenly aware of the West's long tradition of white-on-Asian racism, and The Foreigner flips the script on the tradition of Hollywood studio movies in which a white hero kicks foreign but in some exotic country. Ask yourself, what is the UK equivalent of someone upsetting an innocent vendor's fruit cart during a foot chase through a crowded bazaar? Could it be Chan blowing up the lavatory of a shady bureaucrat? Or perhaps punching holes in the walls, windows and roof of a cozy Irish bed and breakfast? Beyond that novelty, The Foreigner amounts to an above-average but largely by-the-numbers action movie in which Chan does battle with generic thugs and shadowy political forces. The message here is unmistakably not to underestimate or ignore Asian immigrants, who just might be elite human weapons, trained by the US government, and even if they're not, deserve to be treated with the same respect as other citizens, financed mostly with Chinese money, but directed by two-time James Bond Helmer Campbell, who reunites here with GoldenEye star Pierce Brosnan. The Foreigner offers Chan a unique chance to emote before shifting into more conventional vigilante territory. In the opening scene, opportunities for elaborate displays of martial arts dexterity that we've come to expect from Chan in the past, along with a rather elaborate and entirely unnecessary backstory about how he acquired these skills and why he's so angry. When asking nicely gets him nowhere, Quan travels to Belfast to confront Hennessy directly, planting a series of bombs in his office, his bodyguard's car, his country safe house to get Hennessy's attention. But Hennessy is distracted. He's busy trying to arrange his own deal for the pardons of scores of old IRA buddies, and juggling complicated personal relationships with not just the movement's former leaders, any of whom could be responsible, but also his wife, Orla Brady, and mistress, Charlie Murphy, either or both of whom could also be involved, all of which makes it easy for the old man to go on running circles around the lot of us. But why, in a world with so many real human threats, does The Foreigner resurrect the troubles between Northern Ireland and the Crown? If anything, this feels giving the West a taste of its own medicine, since entertainment and elections alike have long drummed up fear and hysteria around anyone of off-white skin color, when the statistics show that mass killings are just as, if not altogether more, likely to be perpetrated by white people. In the movie, multiple Asian teens are killed in an all-too-plausible, albeit dated, act of political terrorism dreamed up and carried out by a faction of the IRA. It's an effective reminder that however scared white Londoners are of foreigners, the foreigners living among them have even more reason to be afraid, living in a country where they could wind up as collateral damage in senseless white-on-white violence. And because this time around Asians are the ones telling the story, it falls to a superstar Chinaman to set things. A slightly odd confluence of factors make Martin Campbell's The Foreigner a splendid action thriller. The picture reunites James Bond veterans Campbell and Pierce Brosnan, but then throws in a healthy dose of the Northern Irish troubles and a top-of-his-game Jackie Chan for good measure. It has taken me quite a while to get to this 2017 effort, but it well worth tracking down. An unexpected bombing kills the daughter of Vietnamese restaurateur Ngoc Minh Quan, Chan. When a splinter faction of the IRA claims responsibility, Quan goes looking to Northern Ireland for answers, and face-to-face with Deputy First Minister Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan. While Quan makes use of a growing number of violent tactics to avenge his daughter, Hennessy races against the clock, save his former comrades and his career. For half of the time, The Foreigner is a tense political thriller about Sinn Féin statesmen fighting to stop Republican radicals from kickstarting the bloody past IRA terrorism all over again. For the other half, it is an old-fashioned one-man-against-an-army revenge thriller, the likes of which have littered popular cinema for decades. The two narratives are nicely intertwined and make something relatively fresh and very entertaining out of their archetypal ingredients. It is a superb film for Jackie Chan, who really needs to flex his dramatic muscles more often. This is arguably his most grounded role since Shinjuku Incident, 2009, and it is the sort of serious, harder fare on which he should be focused. Brosnan has been going from strength to strength in recent years, ably shaking off his old James Bond persona with apparent ease. He is great here. Morally compromised, packed with equal parts regret and rage, and more than willing to get his hands dirty when pushed into a corner. Between the two leads there is a strong, gritty texture to The Foreigner. Nobody is entirely evil or noble. Bad people can have a sympathetic edge. Good people can be led to do bad things. A solid supporting cast also deserve praise. In particular, both Orla Brady and Charlie Murphy do very decent work in a pair of underwritten roles. Campbell directs it all with a steady hand and a well-developed eye for both action and tension. It is not quite the masterpiece of his Casino Royale, but it does demonstrate a well-honed sense of when to cut and what to show or hide from the audience. What is particularly nice is that it simply does not feel like a Hollywood production. Everything feels a little too bleak and complicated. Adult-leaning fare like this feels like a scarce resource in the face of franchise blockbusters and shared universes. I mean, it's not, there is plenty of decent non-toyetic filmmaking going on every week, but it rarely gets the spotlight that it deserves. The Foreigner is smart, fast-paced, and satisfying entertainment. The Foreigner is an entertaining revenge thriller that was released in 2017 to considerable acclaim. The fact that the cast is led by the perhaps unlikely combination of Pierce Brosnan and Jackie Chan makes it interesting. But there's more to the film: script by David Marconi, source material a novel by Stephen Leather, than that. It's fair to say that the acclaim wasn't universal. A review on the usually insightful Roger Ebert website calls it an all-round lousy movie. But don't take too much notice of that, since the critical acumen of the reviewer, who is plainly not the late Roger Ebert, can be judged by the fact that he regards Brosnan's Irish accent as atrocious. Oh dear. Anyway, Chan plays a chap called Kwan, who is leading a quiet life in London when his daughter is murdered in a terrorist incident. He determines to find out who is responsible and mete out his own kind of justice. So far, so very straightforward, but the story gains depth from the way in which Kwan targets Brosnan's character, Liam Hennessy. Hennessy, who bears a disconcerting resemblance to a prominent Irish politician in reality, is presented as a dodgy character, in his personal life as well as in his political machinations. He is emphatically not responsible for the attack which killed Kwan's daughter, but Kwan is right to believe that such an influential figure is bound to know where, to coin a phrase, the bodies are buried. The political dimensions to the story don't get in the way of the action, which is effectively done, but not overdone. Jackie Chan's age makes him an unlikely action man, but he gives a good performance and the implausibilities of the story are addressed quite well in the script, with the tension maintained to the end. I enjoyed it and so, it should be said, did a large majority of the reviewers. Actually not too bad considering where else it could have gone. Marc Campbell's career has never always been the most consistent, but when he's at his best, he can assuredly create an exciting action scene. Among many reasons his Bond films are among the best of the bunch. At his worst, however, he seems to have no control over what he wishes to tell. The Legend of Zorro, Green Lantern. With that having been said, it's also fitting enough to say that Jackie Chan is always a delight to watch in the action genre when the film gives him enough room to work with, leaving part of me to hope that this would be a chance for the better side of Marc Campbell to show itself once again. To some extent, it was worth it, for The Foreigner proved itself to be much better than it had much capacity to be. Even if its more lackluster elements still are noticeable, Jackie Chan stars as Ngoc Minh Quan, a Vietnam War veteran living in London as a Chinese restaurant owner, putting his past behind him up until the moment his daughter dies in a politically motivated terrorist attack. After her own death, he swears revenge on the murderers and even pursues a government official who may have connections with the bombers. Perhaps the story itself isn't the strongest suit of The Foreigner because of the rather predictable plot threads that come and go, But even the film's weaknesses seem overshadowed by moments of ingenuity that don't seem expected for the sort of film it would be. Maybe not always as suspenseful as it seems built up to be, but for what it is, entertaining enough it retains. Campbell's knack for creating an action sequence is present, but it seems as if this is where Jackie Chan's best moments on the screen come about rather than humanity behind his own tragic backstory, which we see in glimpses and only feels rushed at that. They're moments that feel like they could have created more impact had they been expanded upon, but they disappear along with Chan's presence for a good amount of the second half where he just feels relegated towards one area the whole time. Nevertheless, when he comes on the screen he does deliver a thrilling action sequence one after another, only showing that Jackie Chan hasn't lost what made him the wonderful action star he had been recognized as over the years. It's a good use of his own talent if anything else could be said, even if we know he still can manage to provide better. There's no secret present that The Foreigner is a politically motivated film, now with the government official being surrounded at his own ends with acts of terrorism ultimately becoming his own responsibility, now set to be taken down by an Asian, an older woman, and a black police officer. When the novel was written, it was a plausible enough premise because of what was going on in the United Kingdom at the time, so perhaps in response to how America is running its own government it would only make clear that The Foreigner seems angry and calls like a warning. If the development of Brosnan's character arc says enough, from his own rise and fall as his own history as a former IRA member catches up behind him. It's a tad troubling though when The Foreigner seems to have no idea about how to set the tone of its own societal commentary. For the most part it seems bent towards forming vicious action scene after another, almost in a campy nature at that. Especially with where Jackie Chan's character has been reduced to in the second half of the film, Quan seems absent in the strangest sense considering he is the film's leading force. It isn't the same campiness that ultimately has rendered the commentary of a work like Starship Troopers even stronger, but one that only seems distracting in some sense just when trying to piece together what The Foreigner wishes to say. Can't establish a tone that gives itself a new identity, but the occasional bits of brilliance make it more enjoyable. Even if the tone of what I wrote prior seems rather negative, I can still say with ease that I enjoyed The Foreigner on the count that seeing Jackie Chan doing what he does best as an action star once again was truly satisfying. Martin Campbell's skills as an action director do make themselves clear again, but his own faults as a storyteller are present. Nevertheless, it's nice to see how The Foreigner manages to tie in with the current political climate, especially in its anger towards government officials. Maybe it isn't the most subtle, but it makes for a good way to pass time. This film does start out well, setting itself up as an enjoyable thriller, and we actually get to see some real emotion from Chan. But that all gets thrown out the window the moment he meets British government official and former IRA leader, Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan. Quan irrationally focuses his target on Hennessy and chooses to fight terrorism with terrorism to uncover who was behind the bombing. The film was adapted from a 1992 book by Stephen Leather called The Chinaman, which seems an out-of-date term to use even in the 90s. While the film's title may have gotten an overhaul, the number of times Jackie Chan's character is referred to that way is completely inexcusable for a film released in 2017. Sometimes you walk into a film begrudgingly, with a certain sense of dread of what could be in store for the next 2 odd hours. While I was lucky enough to have avoided the epitome of mediocrity that was the Emoji Movie, I had that same sense of gut-wrenching apprehension walking into The Foreigner. The trailer alone had made my skin crawl, with its taken rip-off vibes and garish insensitivities. However, sometimes these films surprise you. They defy your expectations and far surpass your, albeit low, expectations. Unfortunately, The Foreigner was not one of those films. Jackie Chan plays loving father Quan, who loses his daughter to a terror attack in London. He also turns out to be the world's greatest super soldier trained by the US during the Vietnam War, and so, inconsolable and irate, he takes his anger out on anyone who comes his way, whether they had anything to do with his daughter's death or not. The ensuing 114 minutes results in a body count that would make Arnie weep, as the 63-year-old man manages to take out the bulk of Ireland's bodyguards, trackers, special ops forces, and a terrorist cell. This 63-year-old man manages to take out the bulk of Ireland's bodyguards, trackers, special ops forces, and a terrorist cell. Acting never escalates past adequate, besides Chan's fleeting moments of emotion. He plays a character that could have stepped out of any of his action films. Pierce Brosnan is earnest as Hennessy, which sometimes rings true and sometimes comes off as ridiculous and overdramatic. Martin Campbell's direction is entirely unexceptional, with no fight sequences that stand out from the rest, or jaw-dropping moments to keep you in awe. The Foreigner is a bit like if Liam Neeson and Jackie Chan's filmographies had a baby, and then Liam Neeson walked out because it was too much for even him to handle. It doesn't know if it wants to be a deep thriller or a full-on action film, and so rather than choosing one, it just flops around like a wet fish on the floor. This is only just bearable as a piece of forgettable entertainment. If you're like me, you'll be begging for the death blow to come. Based on Stephen Leather's 1992 novel The Chinaman, Martin Campbell's first film in 6 years was rechristened The Foreigner, possibly because of the discriminatory connotations of the original title. The new title is somehow fitting, with Jackie Chan's against-type performance pushed to the side in something more akin to a conspiracy thriller. Chan's sullen avenger might plant bombs, but the narrative is more concerned with multiple betrayals among Irish terrorists and political chicanery between them and the British political establishment. In fact, while marketed widely as a Chan-led vehicle, The Foreigner's main focus is on the struggle of Pierce Brosnan's terrorist-turned-politician to contain the fallout of a series of bomb attacks across London, a situation that threatens his comfortable life as a top-ranking government minister in Northern Ireland. Credit is due for the film's attempt to adapt Leather's story to current-day political realities. But the plot is convoluted and sprawling, bringing into play British politicians, police, and secret services, and largely sidelines the tale's box office raison d'etre. Its tale of a retired killer reactivating his skills to avenge the death of his daughter. This emphasis on Northern Ireland's politics might have led to The Foreigner's subpar performance in China. Having opened on September 30th in anticipation of the country's week-long National Day holidays, The Foreigner has daily grosses half of those generated by the chart-topping, homegrown, mid-budget comedy Never Say Die. And this despite Campbell's film being released in 3D and benefiting from premium markups. Some Chinese viewers might have gone in expecting Chan's usual comic antics, which grossed $368 million for him this year alone in Railroad Tigers and Kung Fu Yoga. At the screening this critic attended, the audience's chattering, phone-fiddling exasperation was palpable, even in an upmarket cinema located in the cosmopolitan city of Shenzhen. Still, The Foreigner should easily recoup its reported $35 million budget in China alone, and Chan's fans and action flick aficionados will embrace it when it opens in Australia, the US and Russia on October 12th and 13th. British audiences who could potentially relate to the story the most are still out of The Foreigner's equation, with release dates in the UK as yet unconfirmed. Railroad Tigers, it's nauseating, a disgusting habit, completely ridiculous, Brosnan tells me on the phone. Young men and women sitting in their cars, with this billowing titanic bulge of fake smoke spilling out of their mouth. I guess it's of the time. It'll go down in the history books as one of the crazier things people have done. You can vape yourself to sleep now, I've read. And better still, he uses that role for a seamless pivot to a trenchant insight about the current state of his working life. I'm at a point in my career where I can move around the map and have a great time doing it. I can pull off the occasional unexpected surprise, and all along enjoy the work. It's difficult not to be charmed by Pierce Brosnan. Charm is pretty much his trademark shtick, and it's what carried him over 5 seasons of small-screen detective comedy Remington Steele. His role as a rakish thief turned gumshoe earned him a decade-long stint as James Bond, which has kept him an in-demand actor with work that's as steady as it is varied, from an ABBA musical, Mamma Mia, to a Roman Polanski thriller, The Ghostwriter, although it's his role as Bond that seems to be the only topic that leaves him at a loss for words. I have no thoughts on who should follow Daniel Craig. He says, 2 decades of constant questioning leading to an apparent exhaustion with the subject. I really have no idea. I'm as excited as the next man to see who they'll select. In his new role, he's shifting into grimmer mode than usual, playing a government official with violent roots in the IRA in politically charged thriller The Foreigner. His past returns to haunt him when an immigrant father makes it his personal mission to avenge his daughter's death in a recent terrorist attack, waging a one-man war on Brosnan and his administration. The film reunites him with director Martin Campbell, who guided him through his first Bond outing, GoldenEye, in 1995. It also acquainted Brosnan with Jackie Chan, who shows off his martial arts prowess as the aggrieved justice seeker. To put it mildly, Brosnan took a liking to his co-star. He's light and easy, a joy to hang around with, but he's down to business, he says. He acquits himself with such alacrity, Jackie does. I think this performance will be a beautiful surprise for his fans, because he hasn't quite played a role like this before. He's just so committed emotionally. He's exemplary, an icon, a classic, a man of his time on the cinematic stage. A clown, an acrobat, a hero, like an older Bond who's learned to go easier on himself. He's taken to globetrotting and leisure, recently seen palling around with Bill Clinton. While he's never been lacking in confidence, recent years have seen Brosnan gaining in perspective and self-knowledge. He appreciates the many trials he's been dealt for building his character and thickening his skin a touch. This might come off as the usual promotion via praise actors trot out on press tours, but there's an earnestness to his words. Brosnan doesn't trade in backslapping like so many of his Hollywood peers. He's charming but serious, and as a dual Irish-American citizen, he's concerned about the attitude towards immigration in the U.S. I think this business with DACA is so cruel, he says. What it's doing to young men and women's lives, tearing apart families. It is an unnecessary cruelty. I became an American citizen in the George W. Bush years, having come to America and paid taxes with an American wife and American sons. I wanted to become an American citizen, and happily did so, in order to have a vote, so I could decide the future of my family. In his new role, he's shifting into grimmer mode than usual, playing a government official with violent roots in the IRA in politically charged thriller The Foreigner. His past returns to haunt him when an immigrant father makes it his personal mission to avenge his daughter's death in a recent terrorist attack, waging a one-man war on Brosnan and his administration. The film reunites him with director Martin Campbell, who guided him through his first Bond outing, GoldenEye, in 1995. It also acquainted Brosnan with Jackie Chan, who shows off his martial arts prowess as the aggrieved justice seeker. To put it mildly, Brosnan took a liking to his co-star. He's light and easy, a joy to hang around with, but he's down to business, he says. He acquits himself with such alacrity, Jackie does. I think this performance will be a beautiful surprise for his fans, because he hasn't quite played a role like this before. He's just so committed emotionally. He's exemplary, an icon, a classic, a man of his time on the cinematic stage. A clown, an acrobat, a hero. This might come off as the usual promotion via praise actors trot out on press tours, but there's an earnestness to his words. Brosnan doesn't trade in backslapping like so many of his Hollywood peers. He's charming but serious, and as a dual Irish-American citizen, he's concerned about the attitude towards immigration in the U.S. I think this business with DACA is so cruel, he says. What it's doing to young men and women's lives, tearing apart families. It is an unnecessary cruelty. I became an American citizen in the George W. Bush years, having come to America and paid taxes with an American wife and American sons. I wanted to become an American citizen, and happily did so, in order to have a vote, so I could decide the future of my family. It's a capricious old game, the world of being an actor, he says. The pitfalls are many, and you have to be tough as old boots to stay at the table. I came in knowing full well it's hard to be a great actor, and hard to be a good actor. But when you see great acting and good acting, it's just intoxicating, and that's what I wanted to be. But what is it that differentiates a good and a great actor? The great acting comes from Daniel Day-Lewis, Anthony Hopkins, Ralph Fiennes, Tom Hardy, he says. The good acting comes from, well, Daniel Day-Lewis, Anthony Hopkins, etc. Players have their moments. It's just that some have those moments constantly. The day after our interview, he's scheduled to ship out to Europe for hotly anticipated sequel Mamma Mia. Here we go again. Mentioning it at all initially sounds like a well-placed plug for an upcoming feature, until Brosnan hooks another hard conversational left and waxes poetic on his long personal relationship with the great nation of Croatia. As he recalls filming a miniseries in the former Yugoslavia, just up the road from the front line of Croatia's War of Independence, a single parent raising a child while working one of the planet's more demanding jobs, one gets the impression he's got a million stories like this. The first thing that seems strange about The Foreigner is its title. Sure, Jackie Chan's character is Chinese and he lives in London. But no one ever calls him the foreigner. Instead, most of the characters refer to him as the Chinaman. They call him that so much, in fact, that it feels like that could be the title and would have been in an earlier age. Sure enough, the end credits reveal the film is based on a novel called The Chinaman by Stephen Leather, and a quick Google search will tell you that this novel came out in 1992, information that makes some sense out of this puzzling thriller. It feels dated because it is dated, and its central drama is so bafflingly complicated because a real-world conflict from 25 years ago has been uncomfortable updated to the present day. Leather's novel, at least according to the synopsis I found online, is actually about a Vietnamese immigrant to the UK who swears revenge after his daughter is killed during an IRA bombing. When Leather wrote this book, the Troubles were still raging across the United Kingdom, and the premise was utterly plausible. But director Martin Campbell and screenwriter David Marconi have taken the basic concept and brought it forward into 2017, where they justify IRA bombings with a painfully convoluted storyline. A group known as the Authentic IRA claim responsibility for the bomb that kills Chan's character's daughter. His Quan appears to be the humble owner of a Chinese restaurant. But when his daughter dies, and the police drag their feet trying to find a suspect, he takes the law into his own hands. And then he punches people with those hands and kicks people as well, because despite his meek exterior, Quan's mysterious past has given him a Rambo-like collection of survival, combat, and demolition skills. When Quan learns that Pierce Brosnan's Liam Hennessy has been assigned to the case, and that Hennessy has his own history with the IRA, Quan confronts him and demands the names of the men responsible for the bombing. When he refuses, Quan begins setting off warning bombs at Hennessy's office, and then at his country home. What should be a fairly simple story about Jackie Chan beating the crap out of the dudes who killed his daughter gets sidetracked in a story about British politics, labyrinthine conspiracies, and even incest. Both leads have been cast against type, the manic and expressive Chan as the stoic and morose Quan, the former James Bond as an amoral politician. But the roles don't play to either man's strengths, and the balance between them is off. Chan is limited to just a handful of action scenes while Brosnan spends most of his scenes staring at fireplaces, drinking whiskey, and screaming, "Jesus Christ," while Quan evades his bumbling minions. It doesn't sound on paper like an appealing combination, and it's not any more engaging on screen. There could be a thoughtful film made of the moral complexities of guerrilla warfare and social inequality, but I'm not sure the place to do that is a grungy B-movie that includes a scene where Jackie Chan wipes out a squad of Special Forces soldiers by sneak attacking them in the woods. I'm also not sure that Campbell, a skilled director of action pictures, including Brosnan's best Bond outing, GoldenEye, is the right man for that job. He is the right man for a straight-up revenge picture starring Jackie Chan. But the movie gets too bogged down in palace intrigue to deliver enough thrills. Quan may not be the most natural fit for Jackie Chan, but he is convincing as a man pushed too far. His diminutive stature and sad eyes also work well for a character whose outward appearance masks superheroic abilities. If only he got to flex them a little more, in a story that didn't feel like it arrived a quarter-century too late. The stuff involving Brosnan and his flimsy political future keeps taking up more and more time, pushing Chan further and further into the background. By the end, he feels like a foreigner in his own movie. The Foreigner is a really interesting film because it is a film with a lot of moving parts, and it is delving into an area and setting you don't see very often these days. However, while some parts of this film are simply amazing, others just don't work at all, which creates a kind of juxtaposition. You'll be sitting there during these moments of high intensity or fascinating filmmaking, but then something from the story will just rip you out of it. So today what we will do after setting the scene is break down this juxtaposition. So to set the scene, Quan, Jackie Chan, is picking his daughter Fan, Katie Leung, up from school, so that they could get to a store to pick up a dress for the upcoming dance. Fan rushes into the store to buy one of the last dresses available, and while Quan tries to park the car, a terrorist bomb explodes in front of the store, killing Fan and wounding Quan. Quan tries to find a purpose after the tragedy, and is desperate for answers. But as the weeks go on, the police are struggling to find leads. That is when Quan finds a link between the bombings and an old Northern Ireland militant group, and so he finds Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, a former member and now Deputy Premier of Northern Ireland, to give him the names of the bombers. This sets off a chain reaction, forcing Quan to use his special forces training to find justice for his daughter. Now, when we move on, we will be talking about the film in its entirety. As such, there may be some. Oh, let's start with what works, because there are some truly amazing moments here in The Foreigner. The first thing we have to talk about is the acting of the two main leads, Jackie Chan and Pierce Brosnan. Take that opening sequence. In about only 30 seconds, they completely demonstrate the relationship between Quan and Fan. To impart a relationship in such short of time, it's very difficult to do, and it makes Jackie's performance in the aftermath of the bombing so heartbreaking to watch. In many respects, you can see the stark difference between The Foreigner and movies like American Assassin. Without that experience, the movie would have fallen at the first hurdle. Conversely, there are some really powerful moments from Pierce Brosnan as the Northern Irish politician caught between competing factions, whilst trying to manipulate things to his own position. There are these moments when he is raging against everything, and they were so fascinating to watch. As well, the action scenes are all fantastic, closer to Jackie's Chinese work than his Hollywood work. Now, of course, given the places that they were filming in, there were a couple of times when you could see a little use of blue screen in and around some of the stunts involving heights, but that wasn't a major issue. However, on the flip side, there are a number of big issues with the movie, and most of them can be traced back to the story. This movie is so full of characters and subplots that it is actually quite hard to keep track of everything. When you look at similar films like John Wick and Taken, well, the first one at least, one of the things that they have is very straightforward narratives. You killed the dog, I'm going to kill you. You took my daughter, I'm going to go get her back. Now, of course, there are more layers to that in both of the films, but that is the central thrust. Here, Quan's hunt to find those who killed his daughter is only one of several threads going on in this film. You have Liam trying to use the bombing to get political pardons for former paramilitary members in jail. You have multiple affairs, the bombers who work for someone else, the police that is working it from their end, and also a journalist floating around. All of this causes the film to really drag once the action moves mostly to the farm, and a lot of the subplots could have been condensed or presented in a better manner. This is on top of weird exposition dumps, which we have multiple times throughout the film, for the same thing. Now, to be fair, in the end, all of this sort of works itself out, which is while The Foreigner is a much better film than a lot of others who have these kind of issues, but it is still an issue while there are some problems. There was one thing I found particularly off, and since this comes at the very end of the film, you should probably skip this paragraph if you have not seen the film. Okay, at the very end of the film, Quan has hunted the bombers back to where they are staying in London, arriving at the same time as the Metropolitan Police. The terrorists don't know that they are surrounded, but then Quan, in the guise of a gas worker, attacks them from within the flat, killing all but Maggie, Charlie Murphy, in the process. The police then raid the building but miss Quan as he sneaks out. There is some tension because they know there is another bomb, but then the police start torturing Maggie to find where the bomb is, and finally kill her after she has told them to tie up loose ends. Okay, putting aside the numerous national and international laws they broke, and the simple fact that this is not how the Metropolitan Police work, it makes no sense whatsoever to kill her. She was much more useful alive given the simple fact that she knows how to smuggle plastic explosives onto planes. It was such an immersion-breaking moment that it almost ruined the film for me. So, in the end, do we recommend The Foreigner? Well, yes and no. When The Foreigner works, it is amazing, and when it doesn't, it is at best a drag, and at worst deeply problematic. At the very least, I would say go see it to see some of Jackie Chan's best acting, and to see him take down Bond. I mean, not really, but it is fun to think. Also, he sings the theme song, and come on, that's kinda cool. If you, like me, saw the trailer for The Foreigner and thought adapted from a 1992 novel by Stephen Leatherman called The Chinaman, which explains a lot about the 90s vibes, The Foreigner, good title upgrade. Stars Jackie Chan as Quan Nok Min, the alert bordering on overprotective father of teenaged Fan, Katie Leung, aka Cho Chong. They live in London, where Quan owns a restaurant, and Fan is excited to go to a school dance. A bomb planted by the new IRA, however, kills Fan and sets Quan on a nothing-left-to-lose path of revenge. Enter smarmy Belfast politician Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, who is Irish, sporting a hilarious Northern Irish accent, who has ties to the 1.0 version of the IRA and has been the first Deputy Second Minister of Irish Troubles since the Armistice. If you're not totally up on the current state of Anglo-Irish relations, this might be a little confusing, and it required some Googling on my part after the movie. Honestly, I still don't really know what Liam Hennessy's job is, except that he's ex-IRA and involved with the British government, which is really all that matters. The Foreigner is generally good at skating past fine print in favor of getting on with the story, but when trying to remember what Liam did for this review, I drew a blank. What is emphasized is that Liam is ex-IRA and still has contacts with that crowd. That's why, in his grief, Quan zeroes in on Liam, looking for answers regarding who killed his daughter. Through their contact, it is revealed that Quan has his own particular set of skills, and he uses them to increasingly dramatic effect to try and flush out answers when Liam proves cagey. Wants to get some of that Taken action, then you, like me, will be pleasantly surprised that The Foreigner is not a Taken knockoff. It's a revenge thriller, so it's in the same genre, but The Foreigner has more in common with John Wick, in that it's dumb in a smart way. The plot is 1990s action movie stupid, but it is also straightforward and all information relates back to the plot. It's a very tight, clean narrative. Characters are given just enough texture to be believable, everyone's motivations are clear, and everyone behaves in accordance with those motivations. Too often movies like this throw out the rule book for the sake of spectacle, but The Foreigner never sacrifices its own logic for a cheap thrill, like all Jackie Chan movies. The Foreigner features lots of action and terrific stunts, but you may notice that, unlike all Jackie Chan movies, the action sequences are shorter and less frequent than in Chan's heyday. He is now in his 60s, and a lifetime of bone-crunching stunt work has clearly taken a toll. He can still deliver, but there's a calculation about his fight choreography now. When he goes for it, he really goes for it, but the film is designed to not make him go for it too much and also emphasizes his age by showing Quan taking his fair share of licks. Chan isn't invincible, and now no longer are his characters. This puts a more human face on the movie, though. Because Chan can't do non-stop action, he actually gets to act. He's always been underrated for his actual acting ability, and with Quan he's got something to chew on, playing Quan's suicide mission with a burnt-out fatalism that makes more sense as the movie progresses and we learn more about Quan's past. The extra non-action room also allows for Liam Hennessy to be fleshed out more than your usual B-movie bad guy. There is, in fact, a very satisfying subplot on Liam's side of the story about his nephew, Sean, Rory Fleckburn, the quiet ones, which would not exist in a dumber movie. The Foreigner is not breaking new ground. Besides the tangle of Anglo-Irish politics, it's not a hard movie to track. But it is exceptionally well made and goes a long way to restoring director Martin Campbell after Green Lantern's belly flop. And the performances of Chan and Brosnan are really solid. It might look like Taken, but don't be fooled. The Foreigner is a simple story told well, so really, it couldn't be less like Taken. My thought on the movie. Here I was, watching another Jackie Chan's movie. Growing up watching his movie, this actor/stuntman/director/producer/singer definitely has a special spot in my heart. I always love his stunts and acting. This time is not an exception as well. The Foreigner is a brilliant movie. It tells about how far a father's love towards his daughter could bring a man to the justice for her daughter's death. The message of a father's love was strong throughout the movie, but this movie is not only about that. It consists the elements of power, political issues, etc. The action, thrill, and stunts just complement the movie perfectly. The plot was built up nicely, and as the story went by, slowly, bits and pieces was revealed, which I think was absolutely brilliant. The ending of the movie was great as everyone who deserved to be punished had paid their sentence and Quan, Jackie, had finally get the justice he always wanted, which I think was perfect. I just love this movie overall. For a movie junkie who doesn't enjoy thriller/action that much, you can trust me on this one. Confronting Hennessy. The second phase of the film escalates as Quan continues his campaign against Liam Hennessy, the former IRA leader-turned-deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland. At this point, Hennessy is caught between his political aspirations and his past ties to the terrorist organization. As the investigation into the bombing of his daughter intensifies, Quan remains relentless, determined to extract the names of the terrorists responsible for his daughter's death. Despite Hennessy's insistence that he knows nothing about the bombers, Quan is not easily deterred. He plants a bomb in Hennessy's office, and later, a fake bomb on Hennessy's car to show that he will stop at nothing to get the truth. As Quan's violent tactics unfold, Hennessy enlists his right-hand man, Jim Kavanagh, to find and neutralize Quan before the situation spirals further out of control. The trap is set. Hennessy orders a series of searches in an attempt to locate any missing Semtex, a powerful explosive that the terrorists may have used in their attacks. While these searches put pressure on Hennessy's men, they are unable to track down Quan, who remains elusive and dangerous. As Hennessy's forces close in on him, Quan sets up a series of traps in the countryside, using his military training and cunning to outwit his pursuers. Hennessy's men are maimed one by one, a brutal and tactical demonstration of Quan's skills as a former soldier. However, during a confrontation with Kavanaugh, Quan is wounded by a gunshot. Though injured, he narrowly escapes, leaving Hennessy and his men to reassess their strategies. The tension escalates as it becomes clear that Hennessy is willing to go to great lengths to protect his position of power, even if it means resorting to violence. The unexpected alliance. Meanwhile, Hennessy's nephew, Sean Morrison, a former soldier in the Royal Irish Regiment, is brought into the fold. Sean is a skilled tracker and tasked with bringing Quan to an end. Sean has a complex relationship with his uncle, both revering him as a powerful figure but also questioning his actions as they become more questionable. In the midst of all this, Hennessy begins to unravel. The political landscape in Northern Ireland is shifting, and Hennessy's past, which he worked so hard to bury, begins to surface once more. His former comrades from the Provisional IRA, including Hugh McGrath, accuse him of caring more about his political ambitions than the cause of the Irish people. McGrath's confrontations with Hennessy lay bare the internal struggle of a man caught between his past and his present. Meanwhile, Bromley, the Scotland Yard commander, grows increasingly frustrated with the investigation. Hennessy is forced to deal with the fallout, especially when a second bombing incident, this time a bus explosion, causes panic. The lack of communication between Hennessy's people and the police further complicates matters, and the tension between him and Bromley continues to grow. Hennessy's betrayal and the truth revealed. As the pressure mounts, Hennessy learns that his wife, Mary, has been plotting against him from the shadows. It is revealed that Mary masterminded the bombings, driven by a personal vendetta stemming from the murder of her brother by a rival terrorist group, the UVF. Mary's deep-seated hatred for the British, including her own husband for allowing the killers to be imprisoned, serves as the catalyst for the series of attacks that has devastated their world. This revelation sends shockwaves through Hennessy's carefully constructed life. Hennessy is forced to confront the truth about his wife and the extent of her betrayal. But instead of confronting her directly, Hennessy takes drastic measures to eliminate any potential threats, including those who could expose his role in the terrorist attacks. In an act of desperation, Hennessy kills McGrath, his former comrade, to prevent the leaks from spreading further. The act symbolizes Hennessy's willingness to sacrifice anyone in order to protect his power. As Hennessy struggles to regain control over his crumbling empire, his nephew Sean uncovers the full scale of his involvement. When Sean learns that Hennessy has been hiding the truth about the bombers, he decides to take action. However, in a twist of fate, Sean, who once believed his uncle was a force for good, is forced to choose between family loyalty and doing what is right. After confronting Hennessy with the damning evidence, Sean ultimately decides to help Quan, providing him with the names of the bombers and the locations where they can be found. Quan's revenge and the final confrontation. Armed with the information provided by Sean, Quan takes the next step in his campaign for vengeance. He infiltrates the terrorists' hideout in London, disguised as a gas man, and methodically takes down the group responsible for his daughter's death. One by one, he eliminates the terrorists, using his precision and lethal skills to execute a flawless attack. In a dramatic confrontation, Quan comes face to face with Sarah McKay, formerly Maggie Dunn, one of the key members of the terrorist group. Their clash is intense and emotionally charged, as Sarah is revealed to have been involved in the terrorist activities under the false identity of Maggie. During their struggle, Sarah is wounded, but Quan does not kill her. An unexpected twist that highlights his personal code of honor, even amid his thirst for revenge. As Quan escapes the scene, British authorities, including SO-15 and MI5, arrive to apprehend the remaining terrorists. They capture Sarah, and under intense interrogation, she reveals the location of the next bomb, which has been hidden in a journalist's laptop. The bomb is intended to detonate during a flight carrying British dignitaries, an attack that could result in massive casualties and destabilize the government further. In a race against time, the airport authorities are able to track down the reporter carrying the bomb, and, after a tense standoff, they successfully intercept the device before it can be detonated. The immediate threat is neutralized, and Sarah, the last remaining terrorist, is executed in a final act of political cover-up. The British government seeks to tie up loose ends and prevent further damage to their reputation, but it's clear that Hennessy's involvement in the attacks cannot be erased so easily. The aftermath and the final twist. In the aftermath of the foiled terrorist plot, Hennessy is forced to confront the consequences of his actions. He receives a call from Catherine Davies, a British cabinet minister who had been scheduled to be on the flight targeted by the bomb. Catherine, aware of Hennessy's involvement, makes a deal with him. She allows him to remain in his position as Deputy First Minister, but only under her control. Hennessy's future is now dependent on Catherine's political maneuvering, as he is left with few options to regain his former power. Meanwhile, Sean, disillusioned by his uncle's actions, makes the decision to end his association with the terrorist group. He realizes the true cost of his uncle's choices and is ultimately left to pick up the pieces of a shattered world. In the film's final moments, Sean returns to the farm, where Hennessy reprimands him for helping Quan. In an attempt to assert his dominance, Hennessy gives Sean one last task, forcing him to commit to the role that has defined the family for years. As the story reaches its climax, Quan confronts Hennessy with a photograph that exposes his relationship with Maggie. In an emotionally charged scene, Quan forces Hennessy to post the photo online, publicly humiliating him and revealing his connections to the terrorists. It's a final act of revenge for the loss of his daughter, as Quan ensures that Hennessy's dark past can no longer be hidden behind his political facade. Resolution and the final scene. The film closes with Quan returning to his restaurant, finally reunited with his old friend Lam. He finds a moment of peace, but it's clear that his actions have left an indelible mark on the political landscape. Despite the resolution of the immediate threat, the broader implications of the story continue to haunt the characters, especially Hennessy, who remains in a tenuous position. In the final scene, Scotland Yard's Commander Bromley decides not to take further action against Quan, despite his violent campaign. However, Bromley's decision is not based on compassion. Instead, he recognizes the necessity of keeping an eye on Quan. The surveillance will continue, even if no formal charges are pressed. As for Quan, he remains a man driven by vengeance, but it's clear that his journey has forever changed the lives of those around him. The lines between justice and revenge, politics and personal vendettas, have blurred, leaving no easy resolution for anyone involved. The Foreigner concludes on a note of uneasy justice, with the true cost of revenge and the complexity of political maneuvering hanging heavily over its characters. The narrative never shies away from the grim realities of both personal loss and systemic corruption, making it a powerful commentary on the human experience in the face of unrelenting grief and the pursuit of justice. In The Foreigner, the characters are multifaceted and deeply layered, each contributing to the film's intricate narrative of revenge, political intrigue, and moral ambiguity. The film's exploration of these characters is central to its thematic concerns, particularly regarding the personal costs of violence, the blurred lines between right and wrong, and the lingering scars of past traumas. This character-driven story dives into the psyches of its protagonists and antagonists alike, making them far more than mere archetypes in a revenge-driven thriller. Quan Ngoc Minh, the Relentless Avenger. Jackie Chan portrays Quan Ngoc Minh, a Vietnam War veteran and widower whose sole purpose after the tragic death of his daughter, Phan, is to exact revenge on those responsible. Quan's character, marked by stoicism, discipline, and a deep sense of loss, is one of the film's most complex figures. While Jackie Chan is often associated with high-octane action sequences and comedic roles, his portrayal of Quan represents a marked departure from his usual performances, showcasing a darker and more tragic side of the actor. Quan's character is defined by grief and the unyielding drive for justice. He is not simply an aging man seeking vengeance. His journey is one of transformation, where his personal history intertwines with the political corruption that drives the conflict. His relentless pursuit of the terrorists responsible for his daughter's death is not only motivated by personal grief, but by a desire to impose order on a chaotic and corrupt world. This intense focus on revenge leads him to employ violent, often brutal tactics, but his actions are also a reflection of his military training and his understanding of the world's harshness. He embodies the archetype of the tragic hero, a man who, despite his best efforts, cannot escape the consequences of his actions. While Chan's iconic action choreography and physical prowess are evident in the film's many fight scenes, it's the emotional depth he brings to the character that sets Quan apart. His stoic demeanor masks the raw pain of his loss, and even as he engages in calculated acts of violence, the underlying theme of a father avenging his daughter resonates deeply. Quan's drive is so consuming that it leads him to take extreme actions, like planting bombs and torturing those who stand in his way, but these actions are never depicted as mindless revenge. They are calculated steps toward reclaiming justice in a world that has betrayed him. As the story progresses, Quan's vulnerability begins to surface, particularly in his interactions with Lam, the owner of the Chinese restaurant he works at. Lam serves as Quan's emotional anchor, a constant reminder of his past life before the tragedy. Their shared history and mutual respect ground Quan in a world where everything else feels out of control. This relationship humanizes Quan and provides insight into the psychological toll that his quest for vengeance takes on him. Ultimately, Quan's journey is not just about seeking justice for his daughter. It is about confronting the emptiness that has consumed him since her death. His actions, while violent, are driven by an underlying need for closure, a desire to restore balance to a world that has stolen something precious from him. Tony's sister, of whom he is overprotective, Robert Loggia as Frank Lopez, a Miami drug lord who mentors Tony, and Manny Miriam Colon as Mama Montana. Tony's disapproving mother, F. Murray Abraham, is Omar Frank's right-hand man who is skeptical of Tony. Paul Shinar is Alandro Sosa, a Bolivian drug lord and supplier for Tony. Harris Yulin is Bernstein, a crooked police officer on Lopez's payroll who attempts to extort Tony. Angel Salazar is Kai Kai, a friend of Tony. Arnaldo Santana Ernier, bodyguard of Frank's who later works for Tony. Pepe Erna as Angel, a friend of Tony. Michael P. Morin as Nick the Pig, an underling of Tony. Al Israel as Hector the Toad, a Colombian drug trafficker. Dennis Holohan is Banker, a banker used by Tony to launder his money. Marc Margolis as Shadow, a Sosa henchman. Michael Alger is Sheffield. Tony's lawyer Ted Bades is Saddlebound, and undercover police officer Albert Carrier as Pedro. Quinn, chairman of the Andes Sugar Corporation Cesar Cordova is Taco Stand Cook, a cook from the Cuban diner. Additionally, Gino Sill portrays the assassin who kills Tony Montana, credited as the Skull. Richard Belzer portrays the Babylon Club, and C. Lana Clarkson appears as Manny's dance partner at the Babylon Club. The Palmer regulars Charles Dyering and Dennis France provided uncredited voice-over dubbing of the Immigration and Naturalization Service officers who interrogate Montana in the opening scene. Garnett Smith, Tony Perez, and John Brandon portrayed the Immigration and Naturalization Service officers. Teen model Tammy L.Y. Leopard appears as a prostitute during the chainsaw scene. 5 months later, Leopard disappeared and has been a missing person since development Scarface began. Development after Al Pacino saw the 1932 film of the same name at the Tiffany Theater while in Los Angeles. He later called his manager, producer Martin Bregman, and informed him of his belief in the potential for a remake of that film. Pacino originally wanted to retain the period piece aspect but realized that because of its melodramatic nature, it would be difficult to accomplish. Sidney Lumet became attached as the director, developing the idea for Montana to be a Cuban arriving in the United States during the Mariel boat lift. Bregman and Lum's creative differences saw Lumet drop out of the project. Lumet had wanted to make a more political story that focused on blaming the current presidential administration for the influx of cocaine into the United States, yet Bregman disagreed. Bregman replaced him with Brian Dema and hired writer Oliver Stone had seen the original 1932 Scarface and had not enjoyed it, so he initially rejected the offer. Only after he talked to Lumet was he convinced to accept the offer, since they agreed on transforming the film from a period piece to a contemporary film, saying Sidney had a great idea to take the 1930s American Prohibition gangster movie and make it into a modern immigrant gangster movie dealing with The same problems that we had then that were prohibiting drugs instead of alcohol, there's a prohibition against drugs that's created the same criminal class as prohibition of alcohol created the mafia in the book The Oliver Stone Experience. Stone wrote, I didn't want to do an Italian mafia movie, we'd had dozens of these things, but then Bregman came back to me and said Sidney has a great idea, he wants to do it as a Mario picture in Miami. I said that's interesting. Sidney's idea was a good one. Stone researched the script while battling his own cocaine addiction. He and Bregman performed their own research traveling to Miami, Florida, where they were given access to records from the U.S. The Attorney's Office and the Organized Crime Bureau. Stone moved to Paris to write the script, believing he could not break his addiction while in the United States, stating in a 2003 interview that he was completely off drugs at the time. Because I don't think cocaine helps writing, it's very destructive to the brain cells. Casting. Pacino insisted on taking the lead role as Tony Montana, although Robert De Niro had been offered it and had turned it down. Pacino worked with experts in knife combat trainers and boxer Roberto Duran to attain the body type that he wanted for the role. Duran also helped inspire the character, who had a certain lion in him, according to Pacino. Meryl Streep's immigrant character in Sophie's Choice 1982 also influenced Pacino's portrayal of Tony Montana. Bao and a dialect coach helped him learn aspects of the Cuban Spanish language and pronunciation. Fayer was an unknown actress at the time, known primarily for her role in Grease 2. Both Pacino and Dama had argued against her casting, but Bregman fought for her inclusion. Glenn Close was the original choice for the role, while others were also considered, including Gina Davis, Carrie Fisher, Kelly McGillis, Rana Arat, Melanie Griffith, Kim Basing, Brooke Shields, Sharon Stone, and Siggy Weaver. Bauer got his role without even auditioning. During the audition process, casting director Alex Gordon saw Bauer and instantly noted that he was right for the role of Manny, a judgment with which both Tu and Bregman agreed. He was the only actual Cuban in the principal cast. John Travolta was considered for the role. Filming. Despite the film being set in Miami, much of the film was shot in Los Angeles due to the Miami Tourist Board declining requests to film there, as it feared the film would deter tourism to the city with its themes of drugs and gangsters. Tony's opulent mansion was UR80's, a Roman-styled mansion near Santa Barbara, California. The picture was shot over 24 weeks from November 22, 1982 to May 6, 1983. In April 1983, however, a scene was shot at Miami's Fontano, Miami Beach. The special effects were performed by Ken Pepiot and Stan Parks. The production was halted twice for severe weather events in California. During production in March, Pino burned his left hand on the muzzle of the gun that had just been fired when he tripped during a fight scene. Production was shut down for more than a week while Pino recovered. A premature bomb explosion also injured 2 stuntmen during a scene shot in his absence. The gunfight scene at the end of the film also includes a single camera shot directed by Steven Spielberg, who was visiting the set at the time. Powdered baby laxative was used as the fake substance for cocaine in the film. Pacino's nasal passage was slightly damaged due to snorting large quantities over the course of filming a second unit team shot for one day at Coronado Beach in San Diego, California. Rating less than 2 months before the film's release on October 28, 1983. Scarface was given an X rating by the MPAA for excessive and cumulative violence and for language to had already recut the film 3 times by that point. To stated, I said I've had it with these people, I'm not taking any more out. Bregman told the New York Times that we have been designated as a pornographic film, will accept the X rating and appeal. Universal would not release the film with an X rating due to the porn perception and the reduction of ticket sales being from ticket buyers. Most newspapers, TV, and radio stations who would not run ads for an X-rated film. On November 8, an appeal board composed of 20 theater owners, studio executives, and independent distributors overturned the decision 17-3 in favor of an R rating. More than the 2/3 required. The Palama believed that the changes were minor enough to be unnoticeable and requested to release the original cut of the film with the rating when the MPA refused. Toom released the film uncut. First 1983 and New York City, where it was initially greeted with mixed reaction. The film's 2 stars Al Pacino and Stephen Bauer were joined in attendance by Burt and Dienlon, Melanie Griffith, Raquel Welch, Joan Collins, her boyfriend Peter Hole, and Eddie Murphy, among others. It was then given a wide release on December 9. Home media. Scarface was initially released by MCA Home video on VHS said video disc Laserdisc and Beta in the summer of 1984. A 2-tape set in 1:33 to 1 pan and scan ratio and quickly became a bestseller, becoming the first to sell 100,000 copies at a retail price of $79.95, a 2:39 to 1 widescreen VHS. Followed years later in 1998 to coincide with the special edition DVD release. The last VHS release was in 2003 to counterpart the 20th anniversary edition DVD. The 2003 DVD was remastered and re-released through Universal Records. The television version of Scarface premiered on ABC on January 7, 1989. 32 few minutes of violence, profanity, and sex were edited out, and much of the dialogue, including the constant use of the word which was muted after the beginning of F, were replaced with less offensive alternatives. The film received a North American DVD release on the film's 15th anniversary in 1998, featuring a non-anamorphic widescreen transfer, a making of documentary outtakes, production notes, and cast and crew biographies. This release was not successful, and many fans and reviewers complained about its unwatchable video transfer and muddled sound, describing it as one of the worst big studio releases out there. The 20th anniversary edition was released on DVD and VHS in 2003, with the DVD selling more than 2 million units in its first week and becoming the best-selling R-rated DVD title in 2003. Music inspired by Scarface, a Def Jam Recordings compilation album featured songs by various hip-hop artists which either draw direct inspiration from the film or contain subject matter that can relate to the film. Scarface was released on Blu-ray on September 6, 2011, in a 2-disc limited edition steelbox package. The set was criticized for its poor picture quality due to usage of an old master created from the DVD release. This too is a DVD of the 1932 Scarface, featuring a TMC-produced introduction by Robert Osborne, and an alternate ending. Bonus features include the making of Scarface documentary and a new retrospective documentary, The Scarface Phenomena. A special gift set limited to 1,000 copies features the Blu-ray set housed in a Gar humidor designed by humidor craftsman Daniel Marshall. The humidor box set retailed at $999.99, a standard 4 Kelvin Ultra HD. Blu-ray and limited edition set were released on October 15, 2019. The limited edition set contains a specially made statue, a newly remastered transfer, and for the first time on Blu-ray the 1932 original. There is also a standard set which contains the same 4 Kelvin transfer and a remastered 1080p disc, but does not include the 1932 version. A month later, on November 19, the 1932 original was given its own individual release. The 4 Kelvin release ports over all of the old special features and adds one new one, which is a reunion special in tribute to the 35th anniversary of the movie's release. In the United States, the film sold 3.7 million DVD units for $78.2 million in 2003 and $285,900. 3,545 as of 2020, totaling 3,985 N16 DVD and Blu-ray units sold for 3,545 as of 2020 box office. Scarface was released theatrically in North America on December 9, 1983. The film earned $4.5 million from 996 theaters during its opening weekend, an average of $4,616 per theater, and ranking as the second highest grossing film of the weekend behind Sudden Impact, $9.6 million, which debuted the same weekend. It went on to earn $44.6 million in North America and $2.4 million from other markets for a total of $65 million. This figure made Scarface the 16th highest grossing film of 1983 and 7th highest grossing R-rated film in North America for 1983. It has since been given 3 re-releases in 2003, which featured a remastered film for the film's 20th anniversary 2012 and 2014, bringing the total earned to $45.49 domestically for a total of $66 million worldwide. In terms of box office admissions, the film sold 14,197,000 tickets in the United States and Spain, 167,544 tickets in France and Italy. 162 tickets sold in these territories. Critical response: critics were generally negative about Scarface when it was Originally released and was criticized for its violence and profanity, the New York Magazine defined it as an empty, bullying and overblown B-movie. Writers Kurt Vonnegut and John Irving were among those who walked out in disgust after the notorious Chainsaw SE. At the middle of the film, Martin Scores turned to Bauer and told him, "You guys are great, but be prepared because they're going to hate it in Hollywood because it's about them." And his review for Newsweek, David Anson, wrote, "If Scarface makes you shudder, it's from what you think you see and from the accumulated tension of this feral landscape. It's a grand, shallow, decadent entertainment which, like all good Hollywood gangster movies, delivers the punch and counterpunch of glamour and disgust." J. Scott wrote in his review for the Globe and Mail, "For a while, Al Pacino as hypnotic as Montana, but the effort expended on the flawless Cuban accent and the attempts to flesh out a character cut from inch-thick cardboard or hopeless." In his review for the Washington Post, Gary Arnold wrote, "A movie that appeared intent on revealing an alarmingly contemporary criminal subculture gradually reverts to underworld cliché, covering its derivative tracks with outrageous decor and an apocalyptic production number finale ingeniously choreographed to leave the antihero floating face down in a literal bloodbath." Roger Ebert rated it 4 stars out of 4 in his 1983 review, and he later added it to his great movies list. Ebert wrote, "Too and his writer Oliver Stone have created a gallery of specific individuals, and one of the fascinations of the movie is that we aren't watching crime movie cliches, we're watching people who are criminals." Vincent Canby praised the film in the New York Times. "The dominant mood of the film is bleak and futile. What goes up must always come down when it comes down. In Scarface, the crash is as terrifying as it is vivid and arresting." Leonard Maltin was among those critics who held a negative opinion of Scarface. He gave the film 1/2 stars out of 4, stating that Scarface wallows in excess and unpleasantness for nearly 3 hours and offers no new insights except that crime doesn't pay. At least the 1932 movie moved. Maltin included an addendum to his review in later editions of his annual movie guide, stating his surprise with the film's newfound popularity as a cult classic. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds a 79% approval rating based on 77 reviews, with an average rating of 7.50/10. The